All right, I want to chat with you guys and gals today a little bit about tricep development and understanding what the triceps do, because if you're going to try to build a muscle, you should probably work that muscle. So when it comes to a muscle like the tricep, which again is the big muscle on the back of the arm, it serves a couple functions. And if your goal is to try to get that muscle as big as possible, you have to respect what those two functions are. All right, you have to respect it. Now, when you watch the bench press there, it's obvious that the triceps are involved. Okay? We've heard this for decades and decades, even from the powerlifting world. You'll see a lot of powerlifting coaches still to this day, and I understand it's been argued heavily against. But the point is, many successful coaches have always stressed lots of tricep training to build your bench up. Why? Because they're a critical muscle on the bench. Now, granted, they're more so when you're an equipped bencher than a raw one, but the fact of the matter is, look at what the elbow is doing. Right? What do the triceps do? We think of the primary function as extension of the elbow, hence the term tricep extension, which you'll see me doing a laying extension in a minute. All right, but that is what they do on the bench press. The elbow extends against the weight on the way up. Now, accordingly, what does that mean as far as studies go? Well, the bench press actually builds two of the heads of the tricep pretty effectively, but it is called a tricep for a reason. Right? You have three heads of it. You've got the two near the elbow, the lateral and the medial head. That one you see on the outside there, that's the lateral. Then you got the long head, which is the one by the armpit, hence tricep. All right, the long head is not worked as effectively on extension. Not saying it's not worked at all. Okay, we need to be clear here. But that is not its primary role. Its primary role is to extend the shoulders. So when you see me doing these extensions, what am I doing? Notice that I take the bar behind my head. What does that do? You see that elbow moving back? That extends the shoulder. All right, and so what does that mean? Well, that means we're working the long head of the tricep. It's getting worked. It gets put into a stretch position. That is what activates that muscle maximally. Okay, now keep in mind, if I were to just take this to my forehead, it still gets worked. Like a standard skull crusher, it still works the long head, just not as much as if we use the long head for that other function. Now, a lot of people would chime in and say, oh, so do other movements that we don't think of as triceps type extensions do that also? Of course, as long as they have that movement pattern. Pullover. Notice there's kind of a pullover. This is a hybrid anyways between a pullover and an extension. That's how we get that long head more involved. A pullover absolutely works that. We know that it does. Well observed. Well observed, well understood. So we know that happens, and I happen to like pullovers. I like pullovers a lot. Have a lot of my lifters do them. How about your back work? What? Yeah, rows technically do it. Pull-ups and chin-ups do it a lot more effectively. Case in point, how many people have ever noticed if you did more work on pull-ups or chin-ups than you have in a long time, like you really increase the volume and you really stretch at the bottom and all those things, how often have you gotten really sore in your triceps, particularly the top half, right? The half of it near the shoulder and the armpit. That happens a lot. People say, man, that area got sore. What's going on? Because you stretched that long head. You put that long head into that lengthened position or stretched position. So we get into the debate, would that potentially help with triceps? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked. I think the answer is yes. I think it absolutely will help. Right? Of course it will. Because you are working that function of the tricep. Now, I'm not saying we need to do those movements to do it, but if we're wanting to get some secondary stimulus there, they will help do a heck of a job doing it. Same thing with pullovers. I would go so far as to say that if someone still needed to fully work their triceps, but they needed to prioritize chest a lot more, I might recommend that they do pullovers in place of some of their tricep work. If their triceps are big and thick and good enough, we'd focus on chest pressing and pullovers, because that way we would balance out that tricep development. right? We would balance out the tricep development going with that chest, and we would get what we need there. So we would get the long head benefits of an extension, and we continue to work the chest as well. So that's a good approach. But if I have someone who, because we all have weak links, right? And we only want to devote so many resources and time towards any given muscle. Like bench will build your chest just fine. So we're talking at that point if someone's chest needs even more work, okay? But they don't want to neglect that long head of the tricep. That's a great exercise to throw in. But by that same token, if you have someone whose triceps need more work, in my case, my chest probably overshadows my arms still, okay? So in a case of someone like me, in that case, you really need some arm specialization. You really need to completely, thoroughly work those triceps. What might you do? Well, you'd add to your bench pressing, you would add an extension like this, one that takes you through that full range of motion, right? To where we work all three heads of the tricep. So that's a good approach also. That's a good approach also, again, depending upon what you want to do. And I think people have to remember this when it comes to our resources. We can only really focus on so many things at once. Unless your whole life is devoted to training, your whole life is devoted to recovery, most people would do well to focus on just overall development and then pick your weak points, right? So if you're picking a secondary exercise for your upper body there after benching, not counting your lat work or whatever, because I like chin-ups and pull-ups there. But if we need to add another muscle there, you would stop and think, are my pecs a bigger priority right now, or are my triceps lagging more? Because whichever one is lagging, if you correct that, the bench press is going to keep going up. You will keep getting bigger. You'll keep getting stronger anyways. So we always need to think about that. So when we start adding a secondary exercise, it's a good idea to think about, what am I trying to do with it? What is my weakest link? Am I really fixing that weak link? Am I fixing it? Sorry, that bench that day was a little catawampus on that fourth rep. I was pretty fatigued. That was an all-out set for me. But I digress back over to the training. You have to think about those things. Because again, the average guy doesn't want to spend hours in gym every day. The average guy doesn't have limitless recovery. They're not blasting a ton of stuff. They may not be bulking hard all the time, right? They may not be getting 8-9 hours of sleep every night. Their recovery mechanisms are not perfect. They don't always need all this extra stuff. So when you add it, you need to pick and choose. And so it's important in that context to know where your weak links are, know what the functions of a muscle are, and pick your exercises accordingly. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.